Now, are you thinking of buying a new bike, but you're not too sure what to look for? Well, no problem. It is new. You're going to be the first owner, so you've got little to worry about. Even buying a second-hand, pre-owned, used, whatever you want to call it, beauty like one of these isn't really a problem. But what about if you're a bit strapped for cash or you've got a limited budget? It's not necessarily a problem, but it does help if you know what to look for if you're going to get the bikes of your dreams and avoid a nightmare. How? Well, that's by using a bit of common sense and looking before you leap. And just remember, this is a used bike that could well have been an abused bike. So let's look at a few older bikes taken in part exchange. Look out for accident damage, damaged headlamp brackets, bent footrests, or bent levers. Of course, bits of damage like that don't really rule the bike out, but it does give you an indication of its previous life. Like this one, look at this 20-year-old Kawasaki Z750. This has obviously been cosseted, and according to the V5, which is an important thing to check by the way, it's just had 4 owners. So let's wheel this one out and have a closer look. One of the first things to do, of course, is get the bike out where you can see it, and if it's got a centre stand, like this one, which is very handy, heave it up so you can have a good look round it. Does the bike generally look right? Nice tank on this one, nice paint job, no nasty dents in it, and it generally looks as though it's been well looked after. Just noticed a little cigarette burn in the seat there, and the padding's a little bit iffy, so that's something that you might well have to bring up with the dealer. But just remember why you're doing this. For one thing, you want to get yourself some bargaining chips, so when it comes to talking money, you can say, oh, it's got a burnt seat, you know, I want something off that. And the other thing to remember is you don't want to buy a lemon, so you want to look for sort of stuff that's going to tell you whether this bike's going to cost you a lot of money. One thing you can look to, see the old crosshead screws here on the engine covers? If someone's been clumsy with their maintenance, they would have chewed those up with a screwdriver and spoilt the thing. They could have rounded the nuts on the cylinder head there, but this one looks as though it's generally been looked after and well maintained. So it looks a ship-shaped bike. So while we've got it on its stand, next thing to do is just sit on the bike and make sure it feels right for you. It all feel nice and neat. Try the levers. Front brake lever, hydraulic on this one, that feels sort of solid enough. The clutch cable operated on this one. Now for my big mitts, it's not a problem, but if you've got smaller hands, you might just think it's stiff. But the main thing is it's free enough, it's not binding on that cable. So again, it's been well maintained. Now another little thing to do, if you move back on the seat when you're on the centre stand, you can actually get the front forks off the ground there. Just do it carefully. What you can do, you can just move the bars from side to side and see if in fact they move freely. Now you've got the cables and the wiring loom around there, so you can hear a bit of a creaking, but that's not the bearings creaking. If you've got anything seriously wrong there, you'd feel the head bearings were too tight. Then just gently let it go forward again. But just talking of that, up the front there and the head bearings, another little test for you to do. If you get down either side of the front wheel, it's better if you've got a mate to actually sit on the back of the bike and get the front wheel airborne, but you can actually pull on the bottom of the fork legs there, and if there's anything seriously amiss, you'll feel a clunking up in the head bearings there, and there doesn't feel anything amiss here. As I say, it's better to get the front wheel up in the air. Now while you're down here, have a look at the fork sliders on the stanchions here. They should be nice and chrome, nice and shiny, with no pits and no scoring on there, because with a high mileage, you do get severe scoring. It wears all the chrome off. You can get the stanchions re-chromed, but again, it's going to cost you money. To show you what I mean, I've got this old one here. Just look at that fork leg. Looks fine from that side. That's the back of it, but that's the front of it. Not only is it worn off there, you can see it's gone well and truly rusty. Nasty bit of work, so avoid that if you can. Also, what that wear does is chew up the fork seals as well. These look okay, but it's important to make sure that the forks aren't weeping. So just run your finger down the back. Any oil there? No. And there's no seepage and there's no telltale oil mark around the fork. So the front forks look okay. Now while you're down here, you may as well do everything you need to do up the front end. So I brought with me a little depth gauge, checking the tread depth. And this one's actually got a brand new tyre, which I wasn't expecting to see. But you just put that between the grooves, and then you can just read it off there. Nearly 6mm tread depth on this one, so that is a nearly new tyre. But you do need to look at that. We'll check the back one as well. but if it's below 1.5 millimetre, it's not legal. So there could be another expense for you. Let's have a look at the brake discs here. This was an early model, solid stainless steel disc, but you can just run your finger across it and just see if it's like a ploughed field, you're going to need new discs. But this one isn't. You've got some lines on it, but it's very, very smooth and it's still thick. The other thing you can often see, you get a lip on the edge here where the pads have been scoring it away. This one hasn't got a lip, so you're not going to have any problems with the discs there. Now moving around to the back of the bike, important thing to check is the swinging arm bearings. Now these are often greased through a grease nipple and people can easily forget to grease the thing because it's tucked way up here with the grease nipples underneath. But look, if you grab hold of the swinging arm, hold the bike as well because it's going to move around, and just see if by heaving backwards and forwards whether you can feel any shake in that bearing at all. And I can't on this one, it feels absolutely sound. And again, while you're crouched down here, let's have a look at the back wheel. Check the rear wheel bearings. A lot of load on the rear wheel bearings with the chain drive to the back there. So just grab hold of the wheel, top and bottom, and just see if you can move it. And again, you can't. It runs very smooth. There's no shake. If the bearings were worn, you'd just feel a little clunk clunk in the bearings, but that's sound. And look at this brake disc again, stainless steel. No tram lines in that, no ploughed field effect, no lip on the end. So the rear brakes are okay. But now, I want you to have a look at the rear chain. So, chains, which you could say is the last link in the powertrain. Terrible pun, but it's true. Have a look at the chain. Tension doesn't look too bad on this one, but you can't tell a lot just by looking at it visually like that. You need to look at the relationship between the chain and the sprocket. Looking through here, the sprocket teeth don't look too bad, but if you get the chain midway between the two runs and just pull, and you can actually pull this one slightly off the sprocket. Not too bad, but see it's moving all the way around there. Now that shouldn't happen, that should be a nice tight fit. So we've got a bit of wear there. Probably the chain is worn more than the sprocket. Looks like a newish sprocket. Just to illustrate the point, there's a brand new sprocket. Here's one pretty well worn. Had it. Can you see how hooked it is? The power has pulled those teeth forward, it's worn the edge, it's absolutely had it. Even worse, through total neglect, is this one, which looks as though it's more off a saw than off a motorbike. See all that hooking? That's absolutely shot. Shows total neglect. Next off, electrics. Looking under the seat here, this one's even got a brand new battery, but even if it wasn't, have a look at the terminals, see if they're clean, not corroded. All nice and ship shape. You can even see the electrolyte level down there. Make sure that's okay. Look how neat this is under the seat as well. There's no nasty wiring anywhere. This is a bike that really has been looked after. Next thing to do is switch on the old ignition and just make sure all the electrics work. Make sure the old indicators work. They are flashing away. Seem a bit fast, but nevertheless, they're doing the job. Now, one more thing I want to do before firing up the engine, because you're thinking he hasn't said anything about the engine yet. Look, let's just roll it off the stand, because we need to check on the suspension as well. So sit on the bike. When we were doing the checks earlier, we didn't do a functional test, but if you just hold the front brake on, bounce the front forks up and down, and just make sure they're not sticking. These feel a bit soft, but again, this is 20 years old. It's from a different era, and suspension was soft then. Same with the rear suspension. See how soft that one is. But the shock absorber itself seems to be working okay in that it doesn't keep bouncing. So it does, that's the standard check. We haven't got any oscillation up and down. So that looks okay. So now, the engine, the big test. Before firing it up, just check the oil. This one's got a little sight glass down there, so you can see the level, but you can't really see the condition of the oil. But if it's got a dipstick on, which this one hasn't, you can actually see what the oil looks like. But unscrewing this one, you can just see around the threads here the yellow golden glint of the oil. And look how clean that is. If that's all black and horrible in there, you really don't want to know. But this one, again, has been looked after. It's as clean as a whistle. So, and if I can just see down in there, but you can't, how clean the chain is in there. It looks brilliant. Now for the crunch. Switch on. Clutch in, it might just be sticking. Press the old button. Didn't think it was going to go for a minute, but it has been standing a long time. So that's fine. No need to rev the nuts off, you know. You see some people, they start it up and straight away it's rev it. But what's the point of doing that? The engine's cold and you're not going to hear a lot. You hear far more when it's just ticking over. And if you just listen carefully, there's just a general rustling there from the valve gear. But there's nothing else. There's no rattles, no knocks. Really neat. Also, have a look down at the exhaust there. See if there's any puffs of smoke. There's nothing. And this one's been standing here in the showroom for ages. It really does seem sound, this does. And the pickup's very smooth as well. It seems a very neat bike.